Welcome to Retire Smart with David Brooks. I'm Chip Maxwell. Well, David, you were on the road again, and now this time it was Las Vegas. Now, this wasn't one of those trips where what happens in Vegas stays in Vegas, was it?
No,
Right.
most people that know me know I'm not really a gambler, so I'm not attracted to Vegas really in any way, except for, unfortunately, a lot of conferences are hosted there simply because
All
they
right.
have the convention space and the hotel space to hold large conventions, etc. So this was no exception. So this is a group, they rotate, so it's not in Vegas every year. It was in San Diego last year. This is the same group where I was blessed to be inducted into the Advisors Hall of Fame a year ago, and I went this year to watch a very good friend of mine, Tony Drake, out of Wisconsin, get inducted to Advisors Hall of Fame. It was really nice to see that, along with a couple other folks. But the group Advisors Excel, which just partners with about 500 of the top independent financial offices across the country, is the one that puts this on to kind of kick off the year. Gives you a lot of legislative updates, and one of the things they do is, which is what one of the reasons we like to affiliate with. They have very good DNA like we do. They give back to their community. They're very blessed to help a lot of great charities. And so every year they choose a charity based on one of the advisor offices that works with them, kind of send it upstream and then feature that charity. And every year I'm blessed to be able to give a donation at the event to help them. This year we stepped up a little bit more. It was St. Jude. And if you're not familiar with St. Jude Children's Hospital, they basically, and a lot of people confuse that with Shriners, by the way, and I actually did in younger days thinking they're the same thing. They're not. But St. Jude is a research hospital that helps kids, in particular with usually cancer, but they don't bill anybody. So not only does the child get the care they need, they take care of the parents' travel expenses to the hospital in Memphis to get the care they need, and they never bill anybody. They work 100% off of donations. And what was great is a good friend of mine named Reed. He runs a very successful financial advisory practice out in Los Angeles. He was really struck by this charity about 7 or 8 years ago, and he's kind of made it their main focal point of their charitable giving for his organization. And then he was blessed to be on stage. And anyway, I'll get you crying if I told you the whole story, but we raised, Chip, $1.3 million for research at this event, just in a single night with celebrating with folks. So it was just great to be in a community that cares and gives back, and it was awesome. So, and we gave a $5,000 donation on behalf of our employees to the cause. So
I'm glad when things like this come up because we try to maximize people's wealth here, but it's not just a blind chase of the almighty dollar. One of the reasons is we want to put people in position to make the world a better place in whatever way you think best.
Well, I always talk about be a good steward of your dollars, and we like it when charities are good stewards of the dollars, and this one does a pretty good job. It passed the mustard test, so to speak. So.
Fantastic. Well, meanwhile, back here, the classes are up and running, 80-plus classes this calendar year at Retire Smart. David, the Smart Spend Down Solutions class, we set up 2 of them. They maxed out right away. And could you just summarize for people what happened?
Yeah, overwhelming response, and thank you for those that were listening last week. They came on. Kyle did a great job on the show last week explaining, but they had 100 people come this week to those classes, over 100, and kind of understand how to spend down your assets in a way that can protect assets passed to the family, even if the one that owns the assets. So if it's your mom or dad's IRA, instead of $8,000 a month going to a facility or a nursing home or memory care facility, we can show you how to legally, ethically, morally protect those assets, have the same amount of care provided at the same facility, yet preserve and protect some of those assets to pass down to the next generation. And it can help the surviving spouse if we have both spouses still alive. It can help the children, the beneficiaries, and there's numerous ways that they plan to do this. They have a lot of tools in their toolkit, so to speak, to help people. So if you are not able to attend the class, they will do a complimentary consultation. Just so you know, what they usually do is what we call an intake phone call. They'll simply talk with you on the phone for about 15 to 20 minutes. The group at Senior Asset Solutions, they will kind of and let you know it makes sense to move forward this time, or give you, maybe even wait and send you to the next class based on your in particular situation. But they are happy to set up complimentary appointments.
So did you catch that, listeners? Even if you missed the class, by the way, David, Michael Luna, the head of our insurance division, Smart Protection, he also said, make sure listeners know that even if they didn't make it to the recent round of insurance classes, Smart Insurance Planning, he'll still meet with you. Kyle Schroeder and Michael Luna of Senior Asset Solutions. They'll be glad to meet with you. 402-369-7777. There's no charge, no obligation. 402-369-7777. Now, next up on the docket, David, you and financial advisor Dustin Galvin are going to visit in the next segment about the ABCs of Medicare. Tuesday, February 6th, or Wednesday, February 7th, 6:30 p.m., right here in the Midwest Learning Center at Retire Smart. Quick thumbnail sketch. What can people expect from the Medicare class?
Well, Dustin does a great job of basically going through the four main parts of Medicare, A, B, C, and D. And not only does he do that, he's going to explain to you how to make the choices. There are two kind of pathways you can run on when you go on Medicare. So we joke and call them kind of pay now, pay later. So one of them is typically much cheaper as you walk onto Medicare, but may end up costing you a significantly amount of dollars more later on. And the other one may cost you a little bit more up front, but it kind of caps your out-of-pocket expenditures every year and gives you at least a known pathway. On top of that, what he does is we've added some unique software where we can show you if you're ever going to have to pay what's called penalties to access Medicare, which, by the way, it's about 75% of boomers will pay penalties at some point in their retirement, according to the Congressional Budget Office. And so we'll show you how to potentially avoid those so you don't have to pay extra to access Medicare. And then he'll actually show you how taxes are played into Medicare as well. So it's a lot of information in about 60 minutes.
Stay tuned for more details on that in the next segment of the show. Meanwhile, into the news we go, David. Well, actually, at our last team meeting, you noted that the market is soaring. You said we now seem to have candidate clarity at the presidential level. And you said something, you said that the dynamics are similar to 1999. What did you mean by that?
So in 1990, and I've been doing this for a long time, so I was doing this in 1999, and it seemed like I could throw darts and clients would make money. I mean, anything you put it in, if they happen to run up there and, hey, we got a website, Chip, we're a .com company now, and that was kind of the adage back then, and the markets just kept going. The fundamentals said no. The fundamentals were like, well, they're not earning any money. In fact, earnings were slowing down, very similar to what we see this year. Earnings came down significantly, and expectations for next year are not great. So when they lower expectations, it's easier to jump over the hurdle if they lower the hurdle, right? So analysts reduce what they say is analyst expectations for earnings on companies. And so that is supposed to mean, oh, these companies are doing great. And we've had some earnings come out so far, and they've not been stellar. I think the only exception was Netflix reported this past week, and they actually had pretty robust subscriber growth, first time in a while, because they're doing that password crackdown. So people are being forced. I'm one of those. We actually had to purchase Netflix for the first time. We had one of my kids' friends, logged in our account. We would just say Netflix on the TV would come on, and all of a sudden I was like, wait a minute, I have to pay for this, right? So now I'm deciding, do I really want to keep it? But anyway, so we're seeing that the earnings aren't really there. And why I said it feels like 1999, because things were on fire, if you remember, back in 1999. Well, the bubble popped around March of 2000. Now, I'm not saying for sure that's what's coming this year, but I will point out election years are typically positive years for the market. In fact, if we go back for the last 130 years, there's only 3 or 4 occasions where the markets were ever negative during a presidential election cycle. However, one of those was 2000, right? So 2000, 2008, and you have to go all the way back to 1930. And we have a lot of data that's lining up very similar to those situations. Overvalued stocks and some of the data points not looking so good. So again, I don't know what that means, but typically we make new highs, as we recently did on the S&P. It's going to push a little higher before it would give it all back, but we want to make sure people understand how important it is to have a risk assessment on your portfolio.
Let's go global for a few moments. David, you flagged this a month or so ago, these Houthi rebels from Yemen making trouble in the Red Sea, and you said this isn't just a fly in the ointment. This is going to turn into a big problem. Well, here are 2 recent headlines from CNBC. One is, Red Sea crisis could jeopardize inflation fight as shipping costs spike globally. And then another one, Red Sea attacks already bigger issue for supply chain than pandemic. Maritime Advisory warns. Now, the supply chain got all jammed up during the pandemic. This headline is saying it's getting worse because remind people what's happening there, and this seems to be playing out as you thought it would.
Yeah, so basically it started with a small amount of rebels just kind of doing the old, almost like Somalia pirates, hostage taking, etc. Take a ship and demand something in return, ransom, etc. Then they started getting funded by Iran, according to intelligence agencies, and getting a little more aggressive. Unfortunately, we lost 2 Navy SEALs this week. Not really reported widely in the news, that were killed when they were boarding a ship to take back a cargo ship that was attacked by Houthi rebels. So this is getting where loss of life is coming, and U.S. loss of life is happening right now this week, which is sad. But I was preparing actually about 4 a.m. this morning. As you know, I'm a pretty early riser. We are doing our annual State of the Market update for our clients this next week, and one of the graphs I was putting together, Chip, it shows you the shipping channel in the Red Sea, and it kind of gives you a dot plot of how many ships are usually active in there compared to a month ago to now. And it's astonishing. And so what's happening is that is a very important pass-through for shipping lanes. And if they have to kind of go around the Horn of Africa or what have you, reroute to other routes, you're adding 16, 17 days to cargo shipments.
Oh, yeah, you're losing your express connection between Europe and Asia.
You're having to actually pay hazard pay to those that are going to work on board the ship because of now the threat that their lives could literally very well be at risk. So you talk about an Inflation Re-Enhancement Act. This could create massive problems. And again, this is a story that I said would probably get bigger, and it is, and it's yet to be unfolded, but it's definitely going to create some problems in the cost of goods and services, which is a problem if we're heading into a declining or slowing economy, which is Wall Street is finally starting to come around and go, oh, maybe that is coming. So we'll see.
Well, let's keep going east all the way to the Far East. Another CNBC headline. It's really bad. China strategist warns of deflation and rock bottom consumer confidence. Well, first of all, give us a definition of deflation and then tell us what's going on here.
All right, so deflation is the cycle where prices actually really drop, right? So not reducing inflation where the prices slow down the growth, or stagflation where they kind of stay the same and we have slow growth. Deflation is really scary, Chip. So in other words, prices actually start to go down, and this happens because the consumer just says, nope, not going to buy it. They can't do it. They can't afford it. And we've talked about the crisis, the mortgage crisis that's been unfolding for the last 2 years in China, and it's starting to really show its ugly head. And people are just saying, no, I won't buy it until you lower the price. And then they lower the price, they still won't buy it. Only a few people buy it. They have to lower it more. And it creates a vicious cycle, right? And then competitors have to lower their prices, which creates now they have to pay their people less money, right? So wage deflation kicks in, and this is how you end up in a Great Depression. If you have real deflation, it is very scary, and it's very hard to fight this, even with the tools like a central bank, like the Federal Reserve here would have. It's very difficult to fight, and it puts you in an economic depression potentially. And again, we're seeing major economists finally speak a little bit of the truth that we've been talking for 2 years of what's going on in other economies around the world. And China is headed for economic disaster. And unfortunately, that means they will use their prowess, because they are a communist country, and use military might to go steal economic growth, i.e. Taiwan, who's booming with chips, et cetera, right now. And so that may rear its ugly head. So there are a lot of headwinds out there for us to pay attention to here in 2024.
Well, and we do pay attention to all these headwinds, as you say, David. We monitor all this because all of this can come back to affect your portfolio. That's the kind of comprehensive analysis that we bring to what we call the report card. And it's complimentary to you. 402-369-7777. No charge, no obligation. We'll look at your whole portfolio. Maybe you're in good shape. Maybe you need to make some changes. We'll make some recommendations on what you might want to do going forward. The complimentary report card. 402-369-7777. Up next, from the halls of Montezuma to the 4th floor of the Valmont Plaza. He was a United States Marine. He's now a financial advisor at Retire Smart. We check in with Dustin Galvin next on Retire Smart with David Brooks. Welcome back to Retire Smart with David Brooks. I'm Chip Maxwell. One of our most popular informational classes is the ABCs of Medicare. We have another round of Medicare classes coming up, and the presenter of those classes is with us today. David, please introduce our special guest.
All right. Thank you, Chip. Yeah, once again, we have our former Marine and resident authority on all things Medicare, Dustin Galvin, one of the advisors, been with the firm for several years now. Dustin, thanks for taking time to jump in the studio with me.
Yeah, thanks, David.
So I always like to get you on in January if possible, because you cover one of the areas that a lot of our clients are already dealing with, and a lot of our listeners are dealing with it already, or are about to, walk on to this thing called Medicare. This is healthcare for basically when you turn 65. There are some exceptions where you can get on it early, but for most people, we're talking about 65 years old. You're going to roll on to Medicare. There are four main parts. You really need to understand all of them. But the reason I like getting you on January is every year the cost to access Medicare changes, right? So what you have to pay to take Medicare goes up, and then the deductibles, the out-of-pockets, all those numbers change. So you can kind of just give us an update of kind of where 2024 are, where we start, what's the premium most people are going to pay, that kind of stuff.
Yeah, so unfortunately this year we didn't get what we got last year. Last year we saw Medicare Part B go lower in
Right, we
price.
actually got a reduction, which doesn't happen very often, but we didn't get that this year?
No, we didn't get it
Is that
this year.
Bidenomics? No.
It might be. We got an increase. So the new premium for Medicare Part B that most people will pay is $174.70 this year. Now, if you're already on Social Security, typically that premium is just automatically pulled out of there. But I say most because, like we've mentioned in past radio shows, not all people pay the same for Medicare. Some actually can pay a little bit more, and then some can pay much more, just depending on where their income is at in retirement. And that usually revolves around Social Security, pensions, retirement accounts. Everything that's taxable going out to you can really cause your Medicare to cost a lot more than $174.70.
Well, you do a really good job of explaining how that affects a lot of folks, and it doesn't always affect everybody. The increased premium we're talking about for Medicare Part B. So there's a threshold. We call it IRMA. Right? I joke around, call it Aunt Irma. Right? She's a nasty relative, comes visits. It's basically you're getting too much income, so the government believes that you should have to pay more to access Medicare. The idea is you're supposed to pay a percent of your income to access Medicare, and when they believe it goes over the threshold, they then start to crank that number up. And so what happens is a lot of married couples don't have any issue with those thresholds because it's a little over $200,000 for a married couple now. But if we lose a spouse, you cut that number in half. And it doesn't matter if the husband has an IRA or the wife has an IRA, those required minimum distributions, they still have to come out, right?
Yeah. So, for Medicare penalties this year, the first amount of income that you have to hit is $206,000, which
For a married couple.
Which, most people, they may not hit that, but what happens when the spouse passes away is, like you said, David, it gets cut in half. So now $103,000, and you're still going to have the highest Social Security. If there's survivorship, you're still probably going to have the pension, and if you have those RMDs that you guys had together, you still have the RMD, and it only goes up. But
and by the way, tax-free interest you may be getting from like a municipal bond or an SID here in Nebraska, that is all calculated into the income, even though you don't pay income tax on it, you will pay the Medicare tax on those dollars potentially. So there's a lot, and we actually have some new software, and Dustin will be sharing that at the next class, which we have one coming up here this next week, right? The ABCs of Medicare. When is that class coming up here? Is that it's like in 2 weeks or something?
That class is February 6th and February 7th. It's going to be at 6:30 in the afternoon, located in the Midwest Learning Center.
Now, where I grew up, that's the evening, but anyway, 6:30 p.m. And you're going to be basically covering, again, as always, at this ABCs of Medicare, you're going to be covering the four main parts of Medicare, A, B, C, D, how you access them, what their potential costs are, what the pitfalls are. There are options that people have to choose, and you're kind of on one side of the table or the other usually when it comes to these things, and you kind of explain both sides. But now what's great is we now have that new healthcare planning software we added on last year that you can really show people where these penalties may really kick in for a lot of folks if they don't do the pre-planning. So that's going to be really, really exciting there. So speaking of exciting, the good news is at least Medicare has increased some of the benefits that our recipients are getting. So we've got insulin down, significantly this past year. That was a huge win. But now you've got some additional services that folks are able to access, right? Even things like marriage counseling are now going to be covered potentially.
Yes, so they're working on expanding their mental health program. And now if you're on Medicare, that's, traditional Medicare, they'll actually offer free counseling, free therapists for, marriage and family situations. Also, what I found interesting is chronic pain. So for people with chronic pain lasting longer than 3 months, they're going to start offering some services towards that chronic pain management. Still kind of looking through the details on exactly what that is, but I know you have to at least have that chronic pain for 3 months before you can get into that management through Part B.
And so there's a booklet Medicare puts out every year. We actually have it at the class, and we'll be happy if you attend the class to send you a PDF version of that book. It kind of explains all these benefits in detail. It is a thick book to print, and it does cost money, so that's why we can't give out the physical copy, but we can get you a PDF copy of that if you attend the class, where you can kind of learn all the ins and outs, the things Dustin will cover that are going to be specific to you. If you have a specific chronic disease state or something, they are trying to expand and enhance certain areas of coverage. The idea, again, I ran on our government a lot for a lot of things, but the idea behind this is they want to be proactive now, and the changing of the guard, if you will, the people that run this are trying to get ahead of chronic disease states, so we're not paying to fix stuff later. We're trying to prevent it or help people, thrive in their care, and so that will drive down ultimately costs, which will save the taxpayer dollars. So I'm all for that, and so it's very important you understand and attend a class like this so you can understand all the ins and outs of Medicare and make the right decision, because we've seen it again. The folks that choose to do what's called Medicare Advantage, in many cases, it can be much, much cheaper, at least on the front end when they walk into Medicare. But in the end, it ends up costing folks a lot of money sometimes, doesn't it?
Yeah, and I think my my grandma put it the best way. She told me about this old commercial back in the 80s with Fram Auto Parts, and you can pay now or pay later. And the theory really is it's almost the same for Medicare. You can pay now, and buy good quality parts, and that engine will run for quite a while. Or you could pay later, and you might not have to spend much money up front, but down the road, if you put bad quality parts in a vehicle, it can break down.
I appreciate you making me feel really old. You're talking about your grandma back in the 80s. The 80s I remember quite well, thank you. So at least Chip will tell me more about the 70s, so I've got that going for me. So again, the class is coming up February 6th or February 7th at 6:30 p.m. right here at the Midwest Learning Center. You do have to register. As always, these classes are complimentary. 402-369-7777. So are there any other big things or news we need to be looking out for on Medicare this year?
One thing that I've seen in the past few years working here with a holistic firm that plans for retirement is HSA contributions. A lot of people don't know if you're going to be on Medicare Part A, you need to stop those contributions, and you actually need to stop them 6 months prior. So that's one thing to consider.
But it's really B is the one that's the trigger point, right? So because A is going to basically be automatic for everybody at 65, but Part B is what they can't access B if they've been contributing 6 months prior, or there could be some penalties, right?
Mm-hmm. Yep.
So
yeah, that's...
And again, you may have an HSA through work, and typically the HR department will educate you or should be educating you on these things, but they don't always do that, and so sometimes it can create a little bit of a rift. Now, it's a minor penalty depending on how much money you've been putting in or contributing to it, but you may have to actually pull those contributions back out or may pay a small penalty, etc. But if you don't get the money out, that penalty will continue to linger. So it's very important. Again, this is why you dot your I's and cross your T's on everything in your holistic financial plan. We happen to call it a SMART plan. It's the M we're talking about right now, medical and health-related expenses, and there's a lot to unpack there. So anyway, hey, look, we're already out of time this week. Dustin, thank you so much for stopping in. We'll look forward to hearing how the class went and having you on the show here in the near future.
Yeah, thank you, David. I think Chiefs by 12. So,
all right. We'll talk to you next time. Chip, what do we got next?
Up next, you have questions. David Brooks has answers. Q&A is next on Retire Smart with David Brooks. Welcome back to Retire Smart with David Brooks. I'm Chip Maxwell, child of the 70s. Yeah, I heard it. All right, into the Q&A we go. The first one, David, is not a question about our SMART process. I have to admit, I'm kind of cynical about financial advisors. If economic times are good, my portfolio will look good. If economic times are bad, my portfolio will look bad. I'm not sure it matters which advisor I have or whether I have one at all. I don't mean to insult you, but what's your response to that? David, we can do a whole show on this.
Yeah. Well, we understand there's skeptics out there. And, I think the problem there is sometimes people were sold something or they worked with some kind of financial professional. It was probably more of a transactional relationship. I mean, when I first got in this business 26 years ago here in about 2 weeks, it was just that. It was transactional, right? Hey, Chip, I've got this blah, blah, blah. And I would charge you a commission to purchase whatever it was I was offering. Or they're selling you a product from a company. They work for a company, an insurance company or something, and they have something to sell you. And so your relationship was not really based on true planning. Now, the difference is not all financial services professionals, and there's many versions of that. There's over 300,000 financial professionals in America that service clients. And I want to believe 90% of them are really good at what they do. Now, there's going to be bad apples. There's going to be a handful that are literally really unethically do things just unscrupulous, et cetera. There's going to be some that just don't have the competence and expertise to do certain things. But when it comes to what we do, so I appreciate your skepticism, we are very focused. So we are an independent fiduciary-based firm, which means we are obligated to do what's in our client's interest. We could work off of what's called a suitability recommendation. At our office, we are going to do what we call holistic planning, looking at everything. We believe there are 5 key areas. This Certified Financial Planning Board believes the same thing. You can go to their website and check it out. Basically, there are 5 key areas. Now, we have renamed those 5 areas to fit our acronym SMART, but basically, we're going to look at 5 key areas. One of the things we often talk about when someone's met with a different advisor, they're getting only typically one of these areas in their relationship. And usually it has to do with investments or helping them pick the investments or what have you, right? And so, one of the things I sometimes say, well, Chip, let me ask you, how'd you get comfortable paying a full fee when they're doing about 20% of the true planning work if they're only covering one of 5 areas? And it's eye-opening sometimes for clients when they go through our process because of how thorough I believe our planning is. Now, obviously, this is my humble opinion, but I don't think you'll get this type of service at most financial firms. I have a lot of friends, some right here in Omaha in this business, all over the country, that do things their way. And again, you need to find someone that can help you achieve what you're trying to achieve. So I appreciate the skepticism. In fact, I welcome you to come in and kick the tires with us, right? And point us out what you think we do or don't do. But as far as he's talking about if the economy is good or the economy is bad, well, the economy is bad right now, at least by the data I've been talking on the show. The markets are good. So no, I will tell you, it doesn't mean your portfolio has to go down. However, if you do not have a proactive approach to the risk management section of your portfolio, it may go down more than it needs to, and we can show you with math
There it is.
what happens. Right?
There it is. This is one of the main things I have learned since I've come to work here at Retire Smart. I used to think, the investment markets, it's like buying a ticket to ride the roller coaster if you're going to get in the markets. Well, if it's up 20%, you're up 20 cents. If it's down 20%, you're down 20%. What I have learned at Retire Smart is we build in strategies so that if the market's up 20%, maybe you're up 15%. But if it goes down 20%, you're not going to take that dive of 20%. We have strategies to mitigate the damage. David, I tell this story about once a year. A client, and we can't guarantee results for clients, but this did happen, that someone called in, this was about 3 or 4 months into the pandemic, and he said, I picked up the phone and put it down about 3 times, like trying to call a girl to ask her to homecoming in high school, and I finally had the nerve to make the call and say, David, how's my portfolio? Because the markets were, the bottom was dropping out 20%, 30%, 40%. It was looking like the Great Depression for a few months. And, he was afraid to get the news. And you said, well, let me check. And you came back to him and you said it was something like, you're down 6%. It was a single digit number. And he was ecstatic. Oh, my goodness. I thought my retirement nest egg was being wiped out. But the strategies cushioned the blow in the rough times. So when the good times return, which they always do, which they did even within that calendar year of 2020, you're in position to take advantage of the upward trajectory.
Absolutely. And so I would just say to people is like, if you're a skeptic, come and kick the tires, with us or even another advisor or two and find out. Because obviously if someone sends in this question, right, I would just tell people, if you're thinking about it, you're probably being realistic with yourself. There's probably something I don't know. And I say it all the time on the show. You don't know what you don't know. So it may be worth at least exploring. And so for those folks, I'd invite you to come to one of our classes, come to one of our taxes and retirement dinners, or just come in and go through our process. There's no obligation. There's no cost to start that process. If you hire us, we'll be happy to explain how our fees work, et cetera. But that's only if you actually fully engage us. So, you can get a lot of great information just by attending this. We love doing this show. We've done over 300 of these shows right here in Omaha, Chip, because we love educating our audience, and we get so many compliments from folks. I mean, I was at the airport and got, somebody walked up to me and said, "Thank you. You provide great information on your show. Really
neat.
Enjoy it." So it's fun to do that. My wife hates that when we get recognized. but anyway, so yeah, there's nothing wrong with being a skeptic. In fact, I always tell people, listen, if something were too good to be true, it's probably too good to be true.
Speaking of too good to be true, the next question, David, is about fake advisors. I didn't know this was a thing, but here's the question. I saw a financial story about scammers posing as fake financial advisors, but it seems like professional identity theft. The scammer doesn't make up a profile. He calls and says, "Hi, I'm David Brooks, the financial advisor you hear on the radio, and boy, do I have a deal for you." How do you, as an advisor, and we as consumers, guard against this kind of fraud?
Well, we prefer face-to-face meetings. We do have clients in over 20 states now, so some of this we do over the internet. We do Zoom, video, conferencing, et cetera. But yeah, this is a very real problem. Scammers are out there, and not only are they impersonating. Now, no one that I know of is impersonated from our office. I want to make that clear. This article was sharing that with us that other offices around the country this was happening to, and it's typically bigger firms. They're taking fake folks from the big national firms and kind of saying that's where they are and offering some kind of deal. But the other thing you need to understand is there are people that, I don't want to say they're posing, but they're not fully credentialed or licensed to do all the things that we believe a holistic financial planner should do. So maybe they only have an insurance license. There's actually a gentleman here in Omaha that comes in and in my opinion, does it illegally because he's telling people to sell stocks and bonds without a securities license. I've talked about it before. David Ramsey has often given people advice on his show nationwide. I like Dave Ramsey's the idea of getting people out of debt, but he does not hold any licensing, insurance, and securities or otherwise. So I just ask the credentials of the person you're working with, right? And you can check that out. State websites, security websites, et cetera. There's things you can do to verify who you're working with, but just be diligent. Make sure the person you're working with has the appropriate credentials, expertise, experience, and licensing you desire for your particular situation.
Going to see if we can squeeze this one in, David. Last question is on electric vehicles. David, I've heard you rail at EVs. I thought of you when I heard Tesla drivers in Chicago were stranded at charging stations. The problem seemed to be defective charging stations which couldn't function properly in the severe cold. I still want to try an EV, but I want to know that I can get around. If the charging stations can be upgraded so they are as reliable and fast as gasoline pumps, then would you see EVs in a better light?
Absolutely. If they could hold a charge. Like I said, if I can drive from here to Denver and not have to worry about it, or I get caught in a snowstorm, et cetera, then I could be more comfortable with it. But, the way we're going to get there is capitalism, free markets, let the best car maker win, right? But unfortunately, we keep pushing these incentives, et cetera, which doesn't involve any incentive for the automakers to get better at what they do. And it was kind of funny because Tesla is kind of the holy grail of the EVs, let's face it. And people were on video in that article. I actually saw some of the videotape they were doing on local news in Chicago complaining, hey, I can't even get 20% of my battery because this frigid cold does affect battery life. So, yeah, and by the way, Teslas were never meant to have to recharge. Just so you know, Elon Musk's original design was the battery pack was under the car. You would pull almost into like a rest stop, drive up on this little ramp, a little trap door would open up, your battery comes out, another one goes in, and you pull away. Yeah, you'd swap batteries in less than 2 minutes. That's the original design. And if that were the case, then that would be like filling up, right? It would take about the same time as a fill up. It's not how they're designed today. And then again, I don't mean to rail on EVs, but if you're really truly an environmentalist, go take a look at what a lithium mine looks like. Just and those that mine there and who work there. You might change your opinion.
All right. Hey, we're out of Q&A for this week, David, but how many openings do we have for a discovery call this week?
So we have 8 of those available for our advisors, just 8, 15 minutes or so to speak with a licensed advisor, ask them anything you want.
No charge, no obligation. 402-369-7777. 402-369-7777. Up next, CNBC says many folks are suffering from holiday hangover, but it has nothing to do with eggnog or peppermint schnapps. We'll tell you what is causing this holiday hangover when we return. You're listening to Retire Smart with David Brooks. Welcome back to Retire Smart with David Brooks. I'm Chip Maxwell. Well, David, here's the CNBC headline: The buy now, pay later holiday debt hangover has arrived as consumers wonder how they'll pay bills. Is this an annual phenomenon?
Well, it does happen with the lingering come over. People spend for the holidays. Typically, some folks, unfortunately, will spend more than they can afford to. And traditionally, that has been rung up on the credit card, right? Or whether it's department store credit card or a credit card. But unfortunately, there are services out there that bait people into doing this at even higher costs, almost usury fees, higher than even credit cards. And unfortunately, this preys on people that typically have less capacity to pay and less credit. And this is really important, Chip. We understand here. This data doesn't show up like credit card delinquencies, which are at record highs right now. So this is people behind the scenes, shadow market, if you will, because the companies that do this type of lending don't necessarily report this to anyone. So what happens is people end up doing this buy here, pay here. And there's several companies that offer this. We're not going to bash any of the companies, but there are a couple big ones out there. And the story featured one lady, I think she rang up about $1,700 worth of things she couldn't afford to buy for gifts to give to friends and family at Christmas. She admittedly knew she was going to pay over 20% more premium price plus the accrued interest to do this. Now, I just psychologically, that is not a good idea, right? But again, it's the feel good. We talked about doom spending at the end of last year. People want you feel good when you. I love to give, right? And so you feel good doing this, and because you don't have the immediate pain of making that payment, it's easy to do this. And should they get into debt, and here it is, you roll around January, and cash flow's a little tight. Credit card's higher than I thought. Rent just went up. Blah 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 blah. My health insurance went up at work, so I'm getting less take-home pay than I thought I would, et cetera. And all of a sudden, you have to pay these bills, and people are struggling and can't. And the scary part, as I said, is these dollars, these people that are delinquent here, are not necessarily being reported in the major data of how many people are behind in their bills. Again, a lot of data points to us not having a great economy in the near-term future. And so I pray for those people that they get diligent on paying off their debts. You don't want to have consumer debt. That is bad debt.
David, this next story, I have to admit, you were teasing earlier about my age, and I described myself as a child of the 70s. I grew up reading Sports Illustrated, had a subscription, and I've done a lot of writing in my life, and actually my kind of tone and rhythm or whatever I like to think. Curry Kirkpatrick and Frank DeFord and some of the nationally famous writers. Well, here's a Breitbart headline, and dozens of news agencies had similar headlines. Publisher of Sports Illustrated lays off magazine's entire staff. Wow.
Yeah, that's an iconic magazine, right? And exactly, growing up, I would love it because what I liked is that they wrote it in short form. Most of the articles are 1 to 2 pages, sometimes 3 pages, but it wasn't and it was great because like in high school, you would read about professional athletes, even Olympic athletes. They even I remember reading about Tiger Woods when he was like 13, featured in Sports Illustrated way before he became the phenom known that he was. So they would find, and they would also feature in the very back, I used to remember this, high school athletes, across the country, little superstars from each state, and you'd read up on that. I was an athlete. My brother was an athlete, and it was just fun. It was inspiring. It was a good read. And of course, every February in the middle of the winter, right, they would have this swimsuit issue. I remember Cheryl Tiegs being on the cover, right, when I was younger, and they'd have these beautiful supermodels on this one, and that particular issue became their bellwether issue. It sold more. They sold more at the newsstands, and it got a lot of publicity, good or bad, what have you. Well, they decided to go in a little different direction here in recent years, and well, the pushback was swift.
Well, there was
and,
a transgender swimsuit model, I think, one year.
Yeah, featured on there,
And
and
then-
then they started doing plus size models. And again, I have no problem with this,
Yeah.
but the magazine had an audience, and for some reason, someone decided to rip that out and go to a totally different audience, not based on any data that would sell. And listen,
The swimsuit thing, it was becoming soft porn, it
Yeah,
seemed like.
yeah.
And then they had this artificial intelligence scandal. They had, I guess, author profiles and articles just generated by AI.
yeah, they weren't even really writing anymore. Again, it's just, and so the magazine, obviously, the content, like I don't know, last time I subscribed to Sports Illustrated, it's got to be well over 25 years ago since I dropped my subscription. But they're gone. I mean, it's done, and all these employees just lost their job. And we talk about these companies choosing to go in certain directions right now. And again, I have no problem with people who are transgender. I follow Jesus Christ as my Lord and Savior, and I'm taught to love everyone in the world. Even one of my sons and I were in I don't want to say an argument, but a heated discussion on Israel and Palestine and things like that. It's like I love them all, but I certainly I have a side I'm rooting for, if you will, and things like that. But these companies that do things, even the LPGA, right, just recently had a man win a tournament. And and there was actually a story I was watching this morning, Chip, where the golfers of the LPGA are scared to speak up because they don't have quite the financial package that the male golfers have. It's not as popular. Over half the players do not have sponsors, so they pay their own travel, everything, and they're scared if they speak up. So Riley Gaines, who we had come speak here, the former swimmer,
We were
university,
a sponsor of that Patriotic Productions
She
event.
has launched a thing. Steph Dillon, who's with the Babylon Bee, they're actually funding those. Hey, listen, you speak up, we'll sponsor you. Because they're putting pushback in there. Again, nobody cares one way or the other. We just don't need stuff shoved down our face. But I think companies that do this stuff, the economics prove it doesn't work. And Disney stock is a great example of that, down over 50%.
David, in the time we have left, I want to ask you about something you sent me here from Morningstar, which I believe is an investment analyst firm. Morningstar?
So, yeah, Morningstar is a massive firm. We pay for Morningstar. Full disclosure, we have what's called Morningstar Office. It's something we can analyze investments through, but they offer portfolio service. We don't use that, but they do investment analyzation services that we utilize. They are massive across our industry, and they're actually known as kind of one of the bellwethers in our industry, yes.
All right. So in the investment world now, ESG stands for environmental, social, and governance issues. All right. Make of that what you will. But the headline on this item is Morningstar to retire ESG commitment level. And the note you sent to me was, wow, message getting through. What is the message?
What we were just talking about with Sports Illustrated, the ESG was pushed to give people this idea that we have to do this good, corporate governance, and we need the DEI crowd, right? The diversity, equity, and inclusion stuff. All that means taking from someone who's worked for something and giving it to someone who hasn't. I'm sorry, that's all it means. And so this ESG they were going to force compliance and corporate governance on companies to do things that just added cost to you and I as the end consumer. It adds compliance costs in the investment world. It adds cost to the products and packages of goods and services produced. And so they created a whole division, obviously, to manage this commitment level. So they're going to make sure that the mutual funds that they were analyzing, they would go, hey, we're not going to put you on the platform unless you're adhering to our ESG standards. Well, the blowback and pushback from all this across many industries, as we just talked about, is severe. And they're realizing it, and they're backing away. Okay, we probably overstepped our bounds here. We're done with this commitment. And so they're pulling and killed a whole department. And so, again, we've seen Jamie Dimon speak on this. I mean, Jamie Dimon recently spoke on why the Trump phenomenon, we'll talk more about the election all year long, obviously, is going on. People are tired of being told what to think, what to eat, what to drive, what to do, et cetera. They want to have their own opinions and live and let live. And the libertarian in me is screaming out. I think more and more people are finding that, look, I'm okay with you being you as long as you let me be me, but I don't think you should force anything on me, and I shouldn't force much on you, right? But the whole world is coming back around from the pendulum is swinging the other way, right? And so I think it'll be interesting to see how this progresses. But in the investment world, this is good news because it means it's going to mean reduced cost to the underlying investments, period. And that means more return for the individual investor.
Well, this is the kind of analysis we provide. So remember, that complimentary report card is out there. And I want to remind you now, last call, we have a few seats left for ABCs of Medicare, one of our informational classes. No charge, no obligation, but we need to know if you're coming. 402-369-7777. ABCs of Medicare is Tuesday, February 6th or Wednesday, February 7th, 6:30 p.m. right here in the Midwest Learning Center at Retire Smart. 402-369-7777. David, bring us home.
Hey, have a blessed and prosperous week. We'll talk to you next time.
Thank you for listening to Retire Smart with David Brooks. I'm Chip Maxwell. For David Brooks and the entire team at Retire Smart, have a great week. Advisors Excel is an independent financial product marketing organization, and David Brooks' selection for the Hall of Fame in January 2023 was based on criteria in the sole discretion of their organization. He was chosen from a group of advisors out of more than 600 independent financial firms they work with, as determined by volume of sales and financial products.